Good morning. So, week 2 of my cooking demos, Miss Ross's cooking class. Um, Welcome again to my kitchen. Today we are going to be doing a grilled chili lime flank steak with some grilled veggies, so that you can eat it as is, or even make some fajitas out of it, which makes a great fajita base. If you've never had flank steak, the big thing with flank steak is that it's very fibrous. And so you need to break down those fibers a little bit because otherwise it gets very, very tough. And there's a couple of ways we do that with flank steak. One of them is the marinade. Flank steak takes really, really well to being marinated in an acid such as vinegar and or soy sauce, something with a high acid content to break, and it literally breaks down those protein fibers and the tendons and ligaments in the meat, which makes them a much, much more tender piece of meat. There are a couple other ways that will also help break down the meat, and I'll show those to you as we get to them. But the first one is doing the marinade, and that's really the trick with flank steak right from the beginning, is to make sure you do that. The other weird thing about flank steak, and you'll see it when I pull it out of the package, is that it's very uneven. It's thin at one end and very wide at the other, very thick at the other. And there's a couple of ways we can deal with that process too. The first is one we're going to do this morning, and that's butterflying the steak. And the second one is on the grill. If you didn't butterfly the steak like we're going to this morning, you can actually create a grill hot zone and a less hot zone on your grill. And then you put the heavy, thicker part of the steak on the hot zone, and the thinner part of the steak in the cooler zone, and so that the two cook simultaneously without one end being burned and the other not being cooked all the way through. So, but we're going to do the butterfly method with this, and we're going to go from there. So the first thing we're going to do is make our marinade, and the recipe is on the Google Classroom as always, but you're going to need about 1/4 cup of white wine vinegar. Realistically, you can use any vinegar you want. I wanted to make sure, if you notice, I put my hand over the this grill top. This is the grill top I was talking about earlier, or in our last video. On one side it's a grill, and on the other side it's flat as a griddle. But we washed everything down this morning because we start with a clean work surface always. And then one of the ways you, with cast iron, because it's a cast iron grill, you actually turn it on and heat it thoroughly, and then it dries it naturally that way. So I want to make sure it wasn't hot before I put this on here. Because I don't want to burn myself, safety first. All right, so 1/4 cup of white wine vinegar. You can use whatever white wine vinegar you want. You really don't even have to use white wine vinegar. But the nice thing about it in this recipe is that it doesn't add a flavor of its own. So if you use like an apple cider vinegar or a champagne vinegar or a balsamic vinegar, they have flavors all their own that are going to change the flavor profile of the finished recipe, and we didn't want that today. So we want the chili and the lime flavors to come through, so we're going to use white wine vinegar, which is completely neutral in terms of flavor in the finished product. So I'm going to use my liquid measuring cup. I need 1/4 cup. Remember always to get down to eye level when you're pouring. Make sure you get it exactly what you want, because just like in science class, you learned that liquids go up the side a little bit through tension, properties of liquids. And so you want to make sure you get it where you need it to be. So 1/4 cup of vinegar. And that's liquid, so I used a liquid measuring cup. We are going to use juice from half a lime. I've got my lime right here. Got out my juicer. Somebody asked in from the first video, what is an easy way if you don't have a juicer to get the juice? And actually it's really quite simple. You can take a fork and you can actually stab the top of the fruit, breaking up the fibers, and then you can just squeeze. And that's really all you need to do, and you just squeeze it several times. But because of my arthritis, I do prefer when I have the option to use my juicer. And it just works really, really well. I like a lot of lime flavor, and I don't like to waste the limes. So I'm going to actually do the juice of both halves, partly because I like a lot of that lime flavor, but partly also because, honestly, it's a small lime, and I want to make sure I have to come through. If you get a giant, one of the great big limes, you don't need that for the whole thing. Okay, that's my juicer. And I need 4 cloves of garlic minced. Welcome back to our giant garlic. We have been using this garlic for pretty much everything, trying to use it up, and it is what it is. We'll just keep going because I don't like to waste stuff. You guys know that. So my garlic press, this is my garlic press. I love this one, and you can see it's because it pops out, makes cleaning a whole lot easier than the ones we have at school that are all one piece. This one pops out, and it's a stainless steel rather, and it's one that is perfect for going in the dishwasher. This one always goes in the dishwasher. I don't have to hand wash this one. It is dishwasher safe. And the ones that we have at school, they tend to, the dishwasher detergent tends to eat away at the cover coating, and it makes it a little bit more difficult. See, that nicely comes apart, makes washing it so much easier. All right. I need 2 tablespoons of honey. You can do this with agave. Agave is a natural sugar from cactus. You can do it with honey. And if you don't like honey, like my sister is violently allergic to everything having to do with bees, this recipe would kill her, literally. And so we would not make this with honey for her. We'd make it with agave. Really, it's not going to change the flavor all that much. But if you want to use a different sugar, you can use white sugar, brown sugar, any of your sugars. It's just that it's a natural sweetener, and that's what you want. It's really not a problem. Most recipes do not actually require a specific type of sugar. You can use agave, you can use honey, you can use white sugar, Splenda, all of those things without really having to do too much adjustment. But there are some ratios because some of them have a higher sweetness point, so you don't need less of them. So just make sure if you're going to sub them out that you double check your ratios, and that's a quick Google search. Okay, so honey is really kind of cool. It is the only food in the world known to never go bad and never spoil. It actually has natural antibacterial properties, antifungal properties, and it inhibits mold growth and things. So in actual ancient Egypt and things, they used honey without knowing why. They knew it helped to heal things and heal wounds. So they would coat a wound with honey or use honey poultice. And that's kind of cool. You can actually take honey that has solidified. Honey does not go bad despite the warnings on your labels. You can take the honey, and even if it's crystallized, you can just run the container under hot water, and it will reconstitute. And I'm actually going to do that with this one because it's obviously been a while since I've used this container. So give me just a second. All right, while that is running under some hot water to melt the honey crystals, I'm going to go ahead and close up my garlic because the whole kitchen's starting to stink. And I'm going to do the other ingredients and come back to the honey. I need 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika. One, 2. And I need 2 teaspoons of chili powder. These are 2 spices that I go through a lot in my kitchen. I make chili, the same chili that you guys made at the start of the year. We make at home, I just make it with bison meat instead of beef. I just like bison better. It has a rich flavor, and it has a lot lower fat with a lot higher protein for the same amount, so I just tend to do it that way. And a half teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes. I need 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I use a salt grinder. It's pink, not because I love pink, but because that was the salt that came with the grinder. It's Himalayan pink salt. It does have different chemicals, minerals that give it the pink color, so it is a high mineral content. I'm not going to worry about measuring 1.5 teaspoons of this because I'm using the grinder to make it easier. I'm just gonna go with the eyeball because we're gonna use it as a marinade anyway. It's not that big of a deal. And I need about 1 teaspoon of freshly ground pepper. Here is my ground pepper. Again, I use a grinder, so I'm not gonna bother measuring exactly. Now I could do this over a bowl and then scoop. It's not that big of a deal. But again, it's for a marinade. It's not going to make a huge amount of difference. And cumin. I love me my cumin. We use it in everything. You guys are always like, oh my gosh, I know that smell. And I'm like, yep, that's cumin. Without it, you may not have ever heard of the spice, but without it, you recognize that something's missing. And I need 1 teaspoon of cumin. You'll notice, maybe some of you might laugh, this is from the Spanish food aisle. It is 1/3 the price and is exactly the same as the stuff in the standard spice aisle. So I just don't bother. I use that one. Okay, and then I need thyme. I'm using fresh thyme. The recipe calls for dried thyme, but you can use fresh. I wanted to use fresh for a couple of reasons. I wanted to talk about the difference between fresh and dried. And fresh thyme, like that, it is a relative of a pine. So rosemary, juniper, thyme, green evergreens are all related to each other. The thing with fresh thyme, it has beautiful scent, and how you work with it, you need more of fresh than you need of dried because the dried has all the water taken out that is naturally in the plant. So you do need a little bit more than it would call for otherwise. It's about a 1-to-3 ratio. So if you need 1 teaspoon of fresh, you only need 1/3 of a teaspoon of dried. But the thing with thyme is you put your finger on the end of it, hold it, and then go down the backside, and the leaves come off. Okay, you don't want this reedy, woody part. You don't need it. It's kind of tough to eat. It's like a piece of wood. Crazy enough, I actually put in a home garden during this time, and one of the first things I planted was thyme, because we all need more thyme. So I put in thyme and oregano and rosemary because they're 3 that I use all the time. Nice little pun there. I know you guys are tired of my jokes, but I think they're funny. All right. So then I've got my ingredients. Now I just need my honey. And you can see there's quite a bit more at the bottom now than there was before. I need about 2 tablespoons. There we go. That's good. All right, awesome. Now, if you do have a garden, you can actually put these into the garden, the little woody parts of the thyme. They make great compost and they smell nice. I'm going to whisk this together just to blend all my flavors. You could do that. You don't even need a whisk for this. You could do this in just a regular bowl with a fork. That will work just fine because you're not needing to add air. You're just blending all the flavors and making sure that the spices are all mixed in there together. All right. So the next thing I need to do is butterfly my my meat. So I'm going to take my cutting board and my chef's knife. This is just a generic chef's knife. Lots of different versions, whatever works for you. And I'm going to open my meat and make sure that I do it over a trash can just so that any purge lands in the trash can or in the sink rather than on my floor. Okay. So you might remember we've talked about purge in the past. When you take food out of a bag, especially if it's been frozen at some point, there is some moisture. You might think of it as blood. It is, but it's also cellular fluid, and it's called purge. So if you freeze meat, if you freeze a cell, the cell walls will burst, and then this intercellular fluid, science class, can spill out. And then when it thaws, it doesn't magically go back in. So what comes out afterwards is called purge. And it's the intercellular fluid and the blood that's left from the animal. But it's not that big of a deal, so don't stress over it. All right, so here's my flank steak. And this one's from Wegmans. They did a pretty good job. I'm actually pretty impressed. It's pretty even across the whole thing. I may not even have to butterfly this. I don't. It's literally like pretty much straight. But sometimes you get a flank steak that's up here. They've obviously done a really nice job in their butcher, which is really kind of surprising. Not for Wegmans, but just in general. A lot of stores, counters, grocery stores don't bother with that. But to butterfly it, if you do, what you do is you take your knife and you basically cut this way into the thickest part, and then open that up like a window or a door, and just open that up, and then you get a longer, flatter piece. But I don't really need to do that because this is pretty even all the way across, so it's going to cook pretty well. So I'm not even going to bother to butterfly this. Just kind of a nice little surprise. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take one of my big Ziplocs. Love me my big Ziplocs. Use them for everything. I use them in my sewing room for keeping patterns and stuff together. And I do that. I do this. I use it for cooking and for marinades. This makes cleanup really easy. So I want to put it at the bottom and kind of keep like a little cup basically. And what I'm going to do is then pour my marinade in. And I want to make sure I get as much of the herbs and the garlic and everything into it as possible, because it's all great flavor. And then I'm going to close this up. And you do want to make sure you close it tightly and squeeze some of the air out as much as possible. It'll make the marinade stay closer to the meat. And then I'm going to smush it around, okay? And what this is doing is making sure that all of the meat gets in contact with the acids and the spices, prepping it for that process, okay? Now, one of the notes on the recipe, if you pull it open on Google Classroom, or you have it in front of you, is that you can actually marinate vegetables in this as well, and make a little bit, and then cook your vegetables in that and for a great fajita. And we're going to do that, but we're not going to do our vegetables quite yet because they'll break down too much. They don't have the fiber problem, like the tendons and the ligaments, the heavy proteins. So I only want to marinate them like half an hour rather than the 5 or 6 hours I'm going to marinate this. You can marinate this for as little as 2 hours or as long as 8. I wouldn't go much more over that just because this is a very strong flavor anyway. And the longer you marinate it, the stronger the flavor is going to become. And this has already got a really strong flavor. But you can see that the meat is now completely coated in that mixture. And I'm just going to put this in the refrigerator, and we'll be back in a couple hours. In about 5 hours, and then I'll show you how to prep your vegetables, add your vegetables to this. Then we'll stop one more time, let that sit for about half an hour. We'll prep our grill, and I'll show you how to finish the process. All right, so have a great morning, and I'll see you in a little bit. All right, so welcome back. It's been about 5 hours since we did the marinade and got the steak going, and I'm going to prep the vegetables so that I can add them to the marinade and get dinner started. So here's our steak out of the refrigerator. I'm just going to put it to the side because I'm going to need that in a minute. And I'm going to prep some vegetables. I've got some mushrooms, a couple of bell peppers, and an onion. And we've done onion dicing before. I'm not sure when the last time we did some slices, or if we've ever done slices with the whole class. I think that's only been something that we've done with a few people at a time. So what I've got here is called a mandolin. And the nice thing about this is it slices very quickly, but it is very, very dangerous if you're not careful, because it does have a very sharp blade. It's got a whole series. This particular one comes with different attachments, so you can cut different ways. But absolutely have to, 100% of the time, make sure that you're using the guard. Don't just use the mandolin without it, because you could very much damage yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice off the bottom of my onion. And then I'm going to just peel back all of the skin and throw that away. And the nice thing about doing this is it's the nice thing about a mandolin is it's very, very fast. The bad thing is it's very dangerous if you're not careful. I don't like using them in school because it's just too easy for someone not to be paying attention and to get themselves hurt. So I tend not to use them in the classroom, although I have used them with some of my adult classes when I have taught adult classes. But when I worked in restaurants, that was something that I saw a lot of people get very injured with. So when they weren't careful, when they weren't thinking about it. So I'm going to take my whole onion and I'm going to put it on the mandolin. And then if you notice on the bottom of the guards, there's some little spikes, and that actually holds the top of the onion, or whatever it is you're cutting. Oops. And I'm going to place it here, and I just run it down, okay? I'm going to get it started, there you go, so that you can see, and then I'm going to actually slice off the top just to give it a little bit of something to grab onto, because it wasn't grabbing on it. There we go. Okay, and you just bring it down, and I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to say that, and then it's not going to do it. There we go. And you get these nice rounds at the bottom. You can also just cut them. It really depends on what you're more comfortable with and how thick you want the rounds. That was getting a little bit thin for me, and I want them to be a little bit thicker. So I'm going to go with these, and honestly, my eyes are already watering because there's very pungent onions. And I'm just going to stick those in there. I'll be back in just a second after I finish with the onions. All right, so I finished slicing my onions. It's the magic of TV, it just keeps going. And I'm just going to put my onions, all those little onions, in here, in with my steak. And then I'm going to do my bell peppers. Now the thing about bell peppers is you really can do them however you want. But in my case, I'm just going to cut them and cut the top off, and then do one slice so that I've got two great big pieces. And I'm just going to take out that inner part, okay, the seeds and the what's called the veins, the white part, and that just lets the flavor through. Most of the spice, most of the capsaicin or capsicum, depending on where you're from, is in the veins and in the seeds. So that's going to be the spiciest part. But these are bell peppers. They rank about 1 on the Scoville scale. The Scoville scale is what ranks the heat in peppers. But you know, depending on the pepper, that can be a lot spicier. But of course, these are bell peppers, so that's not a problem. But you still don't need them, so just get rid of them. Okay. And I did wash these before we used them, and I'm just going to put them in here. And now I'm going to just smush this around, just like I did with the meat. Get a nice marinade on the vegetables, and then this can go back in the fridge. Now with the mushrooms, and I've got my little pile of trash, okay, with the mushrooms, the proper way to clean mushrooms is actually not to wash them, it's actually to take a paper towel and to rub them, and you want to just wipe off any dirt or detritus that you see. The reason you don't want to actually push them under water is because they will soak up that water and it will get them all kind of slimy and disgusting. So that's why you do it that way. I am not going to cut these. I'm actually going to leave them whole. So when I put them on the grill, they actually act more like a steak, like a piece of meat. And the reason I'm doing that is just because I don't have a grill basket here at home, so I don't want to have them fall through the cracks. It just makes life a little bit easier. It's not a problem. Next step is going to be heating up the grill. That'll take about 10 minutes. And I don't need to do that quite yet because the vegetables have to marinate for about 30 to get the good flavor. So I am actually going to put these in a bowl and be ready to use them in about 30 minutes. And I'll see you in about 30 minutes. And then we'll be making dinner. All right, so I think you can now see me on the grill, and we're gonna go from there. And this is our grill. It's set to at 450 degrees. It's a gas grill, so it's a little bit more accurate than, say, a charcoal on top of keeping the temperature set, but it does change. I'm going to put all of my vegetables up on the cooler part of the grill. And I'm going to put my meat down on the hotter part of the grill. And then out comes meat. And I want to throw this away because obviously it's had raw meat. I don't want to save this. And it's going to spend about 4 minutes on each side. I had a couple of little onions left over that didn't get in the marinade, but I'm just going to put them on the top, and they're good. And I'm good to go. We'll be back in about 4 minutes, and we'll rotate the sides, and then I'll show you how to do the crosshatch. So we'll be back in a minute. All right, so I'm not sure what I clicked on the last version, the last little snippet, and I got the little movie version, but we're just gonna go with it. It's all good. So what we're gonna do now is gonna get that nice cross hatching that you want on a grill mark, just because that fire touched, it looks really good, looks really professional. So as you see, it's going this way. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take my tongs and I'm just gonna lift up the meat and turn it a quarter turn. Now, one of the things about when you grill is if the meat is stuck to the grill, it means it's not yet done. It's actually the proteins cooking and changing will release it from the pan or the grill top. So you can see they're done because it released easily. There's a quarter turn, and that's it. My next turn will be in about 3 minutes. I'll turn it over, and then we'll do that same about 3 minutes, quarter turn, about another 3 minutes, and then that'll be ready. I can turn my vegetables over also. Now, if I want my vegetables to be more of that char, I can put them down on the bottom, and that's okay, but you do have to pay more attention to them because you don't want them to get to the point where they're burn tasting, okay? With bell peppers, it's not so much, or any peppers, you can actually, after it cools for a couple minutes, you can actually peel that outer layer of char off if you don't want it, and it'll just leave the nice flavor of it behind. And that's a really nice thing too, especially if you get like spicy peppers, like poblanos, which aren't that spicy, but, and you want to get that fire toast flavor without the char, you can do it that way too. Okay, so I'm going to turn over all my vegetables, and they're going to get that nice char as well. It's a great smell right now. We're having a nice looking dinner tonight, so. Okay. And it'll be about 3 minutes. And the thing about, and welcome to my back deck, by the way, one of the things that we're going to do is after this cooks for another couple minutes, and then we flip the sides, rotate it its quarter turn, and cook for another couple minutes, is that we're actually going to let the meat rest. Before we're ready to actually eat dinner, we're actually going to put it to the side. We're going to finish up everything else. I'm going to get my plates out, my forks, my spoons, all the things that we need. And I made a chimichurri sauce. I'll put the recipe up on Google Classroom for you, but I did not do the demo for it. It's really easy, and we've made some other sauces, so I didn't really feel like we needed to go over that. But I made a chimichurri sauce, and I'm going to put that over the top of this as well and serve it with some salsa and some rice. So we're going to have a nice dinner tonight. Wish you guys could be here. Be back in a few minutes. All right, so we've got our beef, piece of flank steak, off the grill with our nice little char marks. That is the half turning it halfway through each side to get that nice and hot. About 450 degrees should be about the temperature of your gas grill. Now, if you have a charcoal grill, it's a lot harder to get to that 450 degree to know exactly where you are. But you definitely want to wait a good hour with charcoal grills till it's really hot. So you've got some white hot coals. My gas grill takes 10 minutes. I love it. And this time of year, you never know. You might find one on the street corner. Actually, I'll be honest, that's how we found ours a few years ago, but that's how we did it. Here are our vegetables. And while this is resting, I'm going to start the plating process. What it means to rest meat is if you've ever taken meat right out of the oven and sliced it, or right off the grill and sliced it, or right out, you'll notice a lot of juice comes out. A lot of, it's similar to the purge. It's the fluid, the liquid that is in the meat between the cells and between the tendons and ligaments. And if you cut right into it, it just all comes out and it leaves the meat that you have a lot drier. So you want to let the meat rest. A good rule of thumb is about 5 minutes minimum, but realistically, about the same amount of time you spend cooking the meat should be about the same time you rest it, depending on the type of meat. So this one, about 5 to 10 minutes is about right, because it takes about 10 minutes to cook. So that's about right. Obviously, if a chicken is going to take an hour to cook, you're not going to spend an hour resting it. But if it's about a minute per pound, or about 5 minutes per pound, so if it's like 10 pound, 20 pound roaster or something, you want to definitely let it rest a good 20 minutes. And it'll continue to get hotter and hotter. So you also, if you have it cooked all the way to temperature on there, it's like cookies, that when they're resting, before you take them off the pan, they're going to continue to rise a little bit in heat. And that's because of residual cooking. So definitely play around with the amount of time, but very limited, very basic. Good rule of thumb is 5 to 10 minutes rest time before you cut into any meat. There are lots of people with lots of opinions as to algorithms and math ratios, but about 5 to 10 minutes will pretty much do you for anything that you got. Okay, basic rule of thumb. All right, so earlier I made some rice. It's just plain old ordinary white rice, but instead of just using water, I actually used a beef broth to give it a little bit more flavor, a little bit more richness, and to give it a little bit more health, because there's all the vitamins and nutrients in the beef broth as well. So I'm going to put some rice on both of our plates for my husband and I, because he's having dinner too. And then I'm going to put some veggies. And it's always a good idea. It's actually a thing. It's called Eat the Rainbow. And every day you should try to eat a variety of colors, a whole rainbow of colors throughout the day. And what that does is actually increase the vitamin intake that you have and the nutrients that you're bringing in, because actually different vitamins show up in different colors of fruits and vegetables. So if you use the idea of eat a rainbow every day, you're absolutely going to get the vitamins and nutrients that your body really, really needs. Okay. And it's just a good, healthy way. And you don't have to follow all the little things. It's a good way to get it. Okay. And then I've got some chimichurri sauce. Made it a little while ago, so it's nicely flavored. Again, I'll put the recipe up for you. And I'm just going to put a little bit on each plate. Extra flavor. And I'm sure some of you have amazing chimichurri sauce recipes that I would love, to have. It's one of my favorites. It's so good. Okay. All right. And so with flank steak, you can't cut this way. You want to cut against the grain. And what that does is help to, again, cut through some of the fibers. I told you this morning that there are multiple ways to break down the fibers and the toughness of a flank steak. One of them is to use an acid like vinegar, like we did, and the other one, another one is to cut this way, and it's to cut across the grains, so you're actually shortening the grains, and you want to cut very, very thin, and that's, you can see I'm cutting sort of on a bias, on a diagonal down. And that gives you these nice open pieces with very short tendons and very little toughness to it. and really does make for a more flavorful meat. Okay. This is cooked to about a medium. Obviously, if you want rare, you just leave it on the grill less. If you want a little bit more well done, you leave it on the grill a little bit longer. Or, as I said in my recipe, just order the chicken. All right. Have a wonderful night, folks. I'm going to eat my dinner now.